Hello everyone, it's Nick Peters here again, the Gaming Theologian. And in our last episode, we discussed two unlikely brothers. We didn't discuss them, we discovered two unlikely brothers. And there's another religion that has two unlikely brothers. Let's talk some more about Mormonism. Now, I know I said last time we had a community group tonight, but one of my church friends who watched the video remind me, hey, on the first Wednesday of the month, we meet up for church for a prayer. I'm not opposed to prayer, of course, but it's difficult for me when we meet up for church for it because we all meet together, we're in the same room, we're in separate groups, but everyone's praying together. And I'm hearing all this chatter there with, not that people are chit-chatting with one another, but you hear people aloud praying together, and it makes it just so hard for me to focus. So I chose to just do another live stream. Now, we're on our way to the lunar subterranean right now, which is the final dungeon of the game, and fittingly, the hardest dungeon. And when we go in, we are going to be coming out repeatedly, at least at first, because I'm going to need to heal a lot. But as our levels go up, and we get better and better equipment, eventually we're going to stay in there, especially when we get to a save point and I have all these cottages saved up for that reason. Then we'll be able to do things differently. But I saved this talk for this time because I still remember the first time I found out that Gomez and Cesar were brothers. I was blown away by that fact, as it were. I often wish I could forget what happened in this game and play it again and discover that fact, because it was just so astounding. And yeah, we're going to use Rydia's Bayomet summon because, hey, I'm going to be refueling my magic points anyway, so why not? And that gives us a lot of experience points too. And I want to make sure Kane's got some good equipment equipped. Yeah, the defender will go better for him overall. Is that in Mormonism, Jesus and the devil are brothers as well. Now, we're not going to talk a lot about that tonight, but someone did leave a comment saying, I wish you'd talk about Mormonism a few weeks ago, and I said, I'm going to save it for a time, and that time's coming. You know, for many of you, if you're sitting at home, you hear a knock on the door, and you open it, and there are these two gentlemen, or ladies, in these very nice outfits with name badges on. Let's be honest with this point. A lot of Mormons you meet, they're very nice people. I am going to 100% give them that. They're very friendly, they're willing to do what they can to help you out. And that's good. Okay? No one's going to object about that. But that does not make them Christians. Now, where did it all begin? Ironically, one of the places that got it right about where it began was the show South Park, which is probably why it's hard to find the Joseph Smith song on there nowadays. But it's an entertaining run. But yeah, Joseph Smith, he claims that he went out during a reviver service asking which religion is the right one, and that God the Father and God the Son both appeared to him and said, none of them have got it right, and that they were to go and he was to go and find some golden plates that had been buried, recording the ancient rites of what had happened in the civilization before, that people came here from Jerusalem right before the exile and established civilization over here. And they were divided into the Nephites and the Lamanites, and there was a big war at the end. And the Lamanites won, and they became the Indians. And that Jesus appeared over here as well and gave testimony of what he'd done over in the area of Israel. Now, it's a lot deeper than that, but that's the basic rundown. Now, a few problems show up even historically with the story of the golden plates and all that, and one of the best resources I'd recommend you go to is Rob Bowman's excellent book of Jesus' resurrection and Joseph's vision, comparing the appearance traditions in the New Testament, Paul and the others, to the traditions of Joseph Smith, of the vision accounts, the witnesses who claim to see the golden plates, so much of it, and it's a lot more than I can really go into here, and he gives a whole lot better account. It's definitely one you should read. But one point worth pointing out is we have no record of a revival taking place when Joseph Smith says it took place. There were revivals in that area, and the specific preacher mentioned did come at one point, but not when Smith says he did. Anyway, we cast float here because this guy loves to cast a quake spell. And frankly, I'm doing a whole lot better in this dungeon than I thought I would be doing at this point. But that's just because of leveling up and my constant refusal to never run from battles. Let's call in the big guns here. Well, that was great. Edge is a very good, very fast attacker, but he does not handle defense well. And we're calling back as soon as Rosa comes up again. I think one bayonet should be enough. Okay, we're actually going to here first. Or not. this just got very interesting. Okay, we're ready this time. And now we're not going to risk things much more. Oh, there you go. And we've got the Murasami now, a great katana for Edge to use. We're still going to keep the Mage Masher though, because it can work really great on magic users here. So one other thing that happened with Joseph Smith was he claims an angel named Moroni, who was a Native American, appeared to him in his home in a vision. Now, one of the problems with this is Joseph Smith talks about a bright light showing up with an angel and how he spoke to Joseph Smith and they had this long conversation. The big problem we have with this is we can often think about each of us living in our houses, and pretty much every person in the house has their own room. It wasn't the case with Joseph Smith. His house was small. Not everyone had their own room. And so, that Joseph Smith would have a long conversation with someone who had a glowing light and no one else noticed it, it's just not feasible. Then we also have that we don't have Reformed Egyptian as a language, which was said to be the language that the golden plates were written in. And archaeology overall has not been a friend to the Book of Mormon. I think even the Smithsonian has issued a statement on this, that we really can't trust archaeology with what we have alleged to have been taking place in the time. Joseph Smith also claims in the Book of Mormon that when the people came over here, they built synagogues after a style in Jerusalem. There were no synagogues in Jerusalem until after the return from the exile. And these are pretty much basic mistakes that Joseph Smith makes, that perhaps a lot of things weren't known about back then, but today they are known. Not only that, Joseph Smith had a reputation as a con man at the time, and even after his supposed vision where he was told everyone was wrong, there was evidence that he went and joined the Methodist Church for a time. Kind of a strange thing to do if God the Father pretty much told you that everyone was wrong already. And, while there were theophanies of sorts in the Old Testament and even in the New at times, there's no record of God the Father appearing to someone. Now, in the sense that Joseph Smith saw, even when God supposedly appears in the Old Testament, it's like Dr. Claw, you never see his face. And, of course, we talked some about polygamy last time, but Joseph Smith had several wives. And I'm pretty sure this was driving things for quite some time. Because Joseph Smith, let's just face it, was probably a man like any other man who had the same desires as a man, saying, hey, if you can get sex, why not? And if you can get God to back your sex life, that is always convenient. Pro tip, if you ever hear a prophet, or someone rather who claims to be a prophet, say something, and it happens to be really beneficial to his sex life, you might want to get suspicious at that point. Just saying. And keep in mind, the same thing happened with Islam. In Islam, you're supposed to have 4 wives or max, but lo and behold, here comes an exception for Joseph Smith that where God's going to allow him to have all the wives he wants, or rather in Islam, Muhammad had the exception to get extra wives because where he's special, you know. Again, be wary of those kinds of things. Also, a lot of people today don't realize it, but Joseph Smith even had his own personal army. They were called the Danites. And yes, they were a very much warmongering bunch. If you want to see details about this, even from a Mormon source, I think his name is Richard Bushman, wrote a biography of Joseph Smith called Rough Stone Rolling, and none of this is denied. So, you can read a book like this and go to your Mormon friends and say, this is a Mormon who is openly admitting Joseph Smith had an army and that he practiced polygamy. Because the Mormon church really, they don't want a lot of its younger people to notice this kind of thing. Which, this is also something I brought out in a prior time talking about Mormonism, is that don't assume if missionaries come to your door that they know all this stuff about Mormonism. They very well might not know. That's why the internet has been so dangerous to groups like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Because they're supposed to not be taught a lot of the stuff that goes on. Which, this is also why Christian churches need to start telling things about events in church history that a lot of us might not want to discuss because, hey, we've made mistakes too in the past. And we need to be open about objections that our young people will encounter to the faith. Because if the first encounter they have is just a random YouTube video online by someone who doesn't know what he's talking about, but gosh, he can look like he knows what he's talking about, that can be enough to lead someone astray. Well, that didn't work out the way I had hoped. I guess those things are immune to stone. We need to be prepared. And frankly, our young people are not prepared. And that includes being prepared on answering Mormons. I encourage you, if you're going to be dialoguing with Mormons also, to read Mormon literature, including the Book of Mormon, Pearl of Great Price, Doctrines and Covenants, everything. You need to know from their sources what Mormons believe. And as for the test that they give you to see if Mormonism is true, I'd suggest you ask, why should I think the test is valid? Is one of the problems with this alleged test is anytime results come back that don't match with Mormonism, where you just weren't sincere. But when test results come back that do match with Mormonism, in that you get a supposed burning in the bosom, well, that proves the test worked, which is hardly a valid way to do any sort of comparison. Later on I'll explain why this is being equipped to Cain, although in prior games the equipment was known as Dragoon Shield, which made it pretty clear who it would best go to. But, heck, I'll just go ahead and say it. Cesar's going to get his own equipment later on in here that's better for him, so we leave it at that. But why should I trust a test that every time it works in your favor, that proves it's true, and every time it doesn't, the problem is with a person who gives the test, who takes the test? And knowing that, as we discussed in an earlier episode, our emotions are very good at leading us astray. I remember a story with a Mormon who was married talking with someone, and yeah, this account's blunt, but the guy who he was dialoguing with about Mormonism said, little question here. When your wife is having that time of the month, do you want her to trust her emotions? He says, no! Yeah, guys know that, and yet, when it comes to an eternal decision, they want you to trust your emotions. Not a good idea. All of these are problems with the Book of Mormon, and there's times where the Doctrines and Covenants goes against the Book of Mormon. And you can have the concept of many gods in Mormonism, and that goes against the Book of Mormon. Yeah, I've said before that if they just had the Book of Mormon, you would say, okay, where you've got a strange belief that Jesus came here to America, it's wrong, but it's not necessarily anything that contradicts essential Christian doctrine. But once Joseph Smith starts getting all these personal revelations, things take a very different turn. Yeah, we're just taking advantage of things to get in some free healing here. Also, I recommend you check with my friends at the Mormon Research Ministries, MRM, Jeff McKeever and Eric Johnson, because they have what's also known as the impossible gospel of Mormonism, which, for instance, in 2nd Nephi, in the Book of Mormon, you'll find that it says that we are saved by grace through faith. Yeah! After all that we can do. And they connect this with other Mormon literature and show that if Mormonism is true, there is no way you can be saved. One work they use for this is Spencer Kimball's The Miracle of Forgiveness, which, my understanding of it, the idea is, on Mormonism, by that book, it would be a miracle if anyone could be forgiven. I mean, there are evangelicals that buy mass copies of this book and give it out to Mormons to show, yeah, is this really what you want to do? Because not only do you have to turn from sin, not only do you have to repent of your sin, that's all well and good, but if you do such a sin, and you turn and do it again, where you didn't really repent of that sin then, and the path keeps going that way, such that I don't think one could ever truly think they're forgiven. And given the standards of Mormonism, that everything goes by your emotions, that can leave you in a very neurotic state. Ooh, Artemis arrows. And these are very effective against dragons, which is going to be super helpful because there are a lot of dragons here, as you can see, case in point. So let's just take a quick look and see how effective these arrows are. Rosa's taking aim. Fire. Yeah, that's really nice. Other tips for dealing with Mormons on a practical level, I'd say, is when they come over, where for starts, don't offer them things like coffee and tea. Their word of wisdom forbids them from taking that stuff. And that's not really a point you need to challenge. So, when I had a roommate, and we had Mormons come over, we bought Gatorade, Powerade, things like that. And that's fine for them. Not only that, we used to order a pizza for them. Because these guys are having to live on a tight budget. They have to save up and provide for themselves on their journey. If you can do something to give them a meal, you're doing a lot of good for them. And back in those days, we just go to Little Caesars. You get a $5 pizza easily. And that would be what we would do. And it meant a lot to these guys. Don't slam the door in their faces. They will take that as persecution, and they will say, we must be on the right path, if that's how they're treating us. But I'm busy right now, and I can't talk to them. Fine. Then here's what you say. You say, hey, guys, thanks for coming by. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about this, but now is just not a good time for me. I've got something else going on. Can we arrange a later date for you to come by? And if you are busy, genuinely, they will understand that. And they'll be glad to come by at a later time and talk with you. Just make sure you honor that commitment. Tell them to come back and then do that. And if you have to, spend that time talking with people, if you're not prepared, who know Mormonism better than you do, and learn what you need to learn. Yeah, now these guys are being found in treasure chests. But through this already, we're better prepared than we were when we first came across these guys. We're going to be attacking with... Having Kane in the party is a big help for this, since he's so much better than Fosoria was. And we're going to be just having our attackers do the attacking. Let's hope for healing. Good, that's just what we wanted. Since Vidya has the Osmo spare, she can recover her magic points a whole lot easier than Rosa can. We'd have to use items to recover for Rosa, and we don't really want to do that unless we absolutely have to. But hopefully you can see that this is going much better for us than it did when we found these guys in the Cave of Bahamut. Be friendly to the missionaries. Treat the place like it's another home for them. And we had missionaries coming by. We actually had a time where they said they couldn't come by because their vehicle was being worked on, and they had no way of getting to see us. So what do? I say, not a problem. I'll come by and pick you up. And that's exactly what I did. And you know what else that meant? That meant that on the car ride to and from there, the whole time, they had nowhere they could run. And what can I do then? Give them the gospel. That's exactly what I did. So the plan worked great for me. So be willing to do things like that. Mormons need Jesus too. And you also want to study up on other things in Mormon history that a lot of your Mormon friends don't know about as well. The Mountain Meadows Massacre is a good one to know about, because Brigham Young, he had more wives than Joseph Smith did, and he was a very bloodthirsty man in many ways. He had a doctrine known as blood atonement. You say, well, that's not so bad, isn't that a Christian doctrine? Not this way, it wasn't. For Brigham Young, yeah, here's the crystal equipment. That's for Cesar. He said there were some sins so bad that the sinner's own blood was insufficient to cover them. For that, they needed to pay with their own blood. Jesus' blood could not cover. The sinner has to pay his own blood to make the final atonement. By the way, Utah is the only state that still has firing squad for the death penalty. I don't think that's a coincidence. But I recommend you go check the Mormon Research Ministry. Look up Rob Bowman's book on Jesus' resurrection and Joseph's visions. Because right now I'm kind of getting to a stopping point, so I don't want to go into more details. And since I'm getting to a stopping point, I'm going to throw caution to the wind a bit and just go ahead and summon Bahamut. Please, people, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I always forget to say that. And, oh, by the way, happy anniversary to my parents, who I'm sure are watching this right now. For them, it's 48 years, which is quite an accomplishment. I hope to have my own lady someday soon to celebrate an anniversary with. Please support me on Patreon. It means so much to have your support with what I do. Even a little bit helps. It may be a little bit to you, but it's a lot to me. I mean, if I had 100 people who donated $5 a month to what I'm doing here, I go, for the time being, I'd be set. I would have so much more that I would be capable of doing. And if you benefit from these conversations that we're having, then it's proper to help out with the work that goes into them. Because I have to do a lot of study to learn these kinds of things and to know these kinds of things and be ready whenever people come in here to answer questions immediately. So please become a donor. It means so much. And there is Crystal Mail. So since we are at a stopping point, then what we're going to do is teleport. Honestly, we did a whole lot better than I thought we'd do going in here. I'm pretty pleased with the process. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to finish this game, but we are nearing that time. I really don't see things going beyond the end of next week. And I've already got the next game in mind to do. But for now, I'm Nick Peters, the Gaming Theologian. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you next time.